I am in favor of voters being required to take a particular test before being allowed to vote. Now, let me be very clear on this. This is a test that I would put upon all voters, regardless of demographics, just to make sure that everybody understands that this is very fair. Okay, so when it concerns the kind of test, what kind of test would I put and why would I do it? Well, first of all, by determining the kind of test, that should show you my intentions of why I am putting the test, because if I'm placing a test, then the kind of test should, in some ways, characterize the reason for the test in itself. So the particular kind of test that I'm going to put is not going to be a history test. It's not going to be a literacy test per se, or an IQ test, or some other physical test. None of that. But rather, it is simply going to be, you need to be able to write the first 1,000 words of the Constitution from memory. And so it's a very simple memorization and writing test of a document that is in law throughout the entire jurisdiction of the country, and also is therefore applicable to every person. Now, you might ask, why don't I take other types of tests? Well, the reason I don't take those other types of tests is because if you decide that there's certain type of information that you want people to know, or certain things you want people to understand, then you end up with a problem of a potential bias among the test makers, slanting and fudging the way that tests are approving of certain individuals. So I don't want to do that. Okay, I don't want to necessarily exclude individuals with a certain particular political viewpoint or a certain viewpoint on history. So instead, I've simply put the Constitution, which is a law that applies to everyone in the entire country. And there you go. Now, some countries don't have constitutions, in which case I would say get one. I think it's a lot better, in my opinion, to have a written foundational law, so that if disputes arise, those disputes can easily be resolved by referring to a solid and a relatively unchanging document. So there you go. Now, what would this accomplish? What this would accomplish is that it would create a bias for a certain few things. First of all, literacy is biased in some respect, because in order to memorize and write out a document, reading is going to make that a lot easier, and therefore being able to comprehend the language that it's written in is also going to make that a lot easier. Now, in theory, someone could just take a look at these pages of symbols and write them out from memory, but I think that would be a lot more difficult than someone who actually knows the language and is capable of reading the text of that language. And this also has the effect of biasing the capability to vote towards individuals that are actually capable of reading the law, which I think is very important if you're going to make any determinations considering changes to laws, such as voting for candidates that want to change the laws in certain ways, this way or that way. Why should your opinion count if you can't even understand the law? Not necessarily comprehend the exact meaning of it, but simply understand it in a written form. And so the other aspect is the length of it. 1,000 words. That may sound like a lot for some people to memorize, certainly for individuals who are not accustomed to memorizing long texts. But I remember in high school I had to memorize the Gettysburg Address. It's probably, I don't know how many words that is, probably not 1,000, but memorization for humans is not actually that difficult unless you're mentally disabled, in which case I don't necessarily think that mentally disabled individuals are the best disposed to make wise voting decisions, but instead of simply excluding them on principle, I've chosen to instead make a test that can divide that out in some respect. So 1,000 words is actually not that difficult to memorize if you try it. It might be hard to do in a single day. However, given some time, it certainly is something that is possible for, I would say, pretty much anyone who is not mentally deficient. It should be possible. Because people memorize songs, they memorize quotes from movie stars, they memorize varying information from, let's say, even TV commercials. And if you were to add all that up, it'd be many thousands of words that individuals have memorized in their minds. And the human brain has a significantly large language center. So I think that 1,000 words is actually not very hard, especially if you consider that in the days before books were very common and available, there were many individuals who would memorize poems that had many thousands of words. So I certainly say that 1,000 words is in no way harsh, or would in no way make it too difficult, except for individuals who are mentally disabled in some way, in which case, if you can't memorize 1,000 words, I doubt that you're going to be able to really fully keep up with politics and be reasonably enough informed to vote. And so I think that that's a fair assessment as well. Now, again, I would say that in response to this, of course, the Constitution should be made available to every citizen, so that there's no situation where someone says, well, I am capable of doing this, but I don't have the opportunity because the government won't let me have a copy of the Constitution. I think the Constitution should be a publication available to every citizen, so that would prevent that problem. Also, having a memorization test instead of, let's say, a multiple choice test with 10, 20, 30, 40 questions or something is, in my opinion, a better method of preventing cheating, because it's pretty hard to cheat memorization. What you'd have to do is you'd literally have to take a copy of the text and cheat off of that. And if you're trying to write 1,000 words, the chances of getting caught doing that are high because of simply the length of the text that is required. So I think that this is a pretty good way to ensure that individuals who are voting are individuals who are actually there of their own volition and of their own initiative, because memorizing all this information would not be possible for someone who is very mentally deficient in some way, and would not be likely for someone who is uninterested in politics. So it would prevent a situation where someone either on the left or the right, or whichever political party you pick, just simply decides to bus in a bunch of ignoramuses. Not saying that all ignoramuses are bad, but I'm just saying that there are certain ignoramuses that, in my opinion, shouldn't vote, especially if you're just going to go in and without knowing anything about the candidates and vote party line. That's something that I'm not in favor of. But instead of simply weeding them out by some really convoluted, do you understand this test, and that and the other thing, I simply decide just a basic test that shows that you're capable of understanding the language the laws are written in, and are and have a reasonable mental capability in order to interact with politics. And that's it. It's very simple. I don't think it discriminates against any particular group, except for maybe the mentally disabled and individuals who are lazy. Those are the only groups that this is in any way discriminating against. And I think if you're too lazy to get informed, then you probably shouldn't vote anyway. And if you're mentally disabled in a major way, then you probably shouldn't vote either. So instead of simply banning such people, I decided to make a little test, and I think that's fair. Now tell me what you think. Do you think that this would be problematic in a major way or in a minor way? Or perhaps you have a different opinion on what sort of test it should be? But I think that this test is easy enough that almost anyone should be able to do it. And I think it would certainly increase the quality of voting to a certain extent. And perhaps you could even remove age limitations if you really want to. Because people always say, oh, younger people want to vote. Well, maybe if they're smart enough, they can have it. But there you go. I don't know. And people are also complaining, oh, there's geriatrics voting. And I think, well, if you're reasonably sound of mind, then you can vote. So tell me what you think in the comments section below. Am I a horrible person? I certainly hope I am not. If you'd like to discuss this with me, I would be happy to discuss it. Perhaps even live if you want to. We'll do it live. And thank you all for watching, and I'll be seeing you all next time on Awilsos Over and Out.